I never made it. I literally walked off the stage, and a gentleman, escorted by two younger men, looked at me, shook my hand, and said, "Young man," he said, "I wish I'd have heard you 31 years ago." I said, "How so, sir?" He said, 31 years ago, my wife passed away. He said, "You know how many times on the way to work, young man, I used to drive down that highway, and uppermost in my mind was what I had to do when I got to work." He said, "I missed the whole ride." He said, "You know how many times, young man, at lunch, instead of enjoying my lunch with the people I was eating my lunch with, what was I doing? I was thinking about what I had to do next, what I had to do after lunch." And then I saw a tear come down his face. And when I saw the tear and the emotion, he said, "Young man, my girls live on the East Coast." He said, "I live here in Seattle. My wife is gone." He said, "You know how many times at dinner, instead of enjoying my family and being that whole person, you know what I did? Uppermost in my mind was what I had to do after dinner." Another tear joined this cheek when he said, "Young man," still holding my hand, he said, "I'm 97 years old." He said, "I officially lived my life 30 minutes ahead." He said, "Can I give you a piece of advice?" And I said, "Absolutely." As a matter of fact, what you're about to hear are the last two sentences in that book. He looked at me and he said, "I'm going to give you two short sentences." He said, the first one ends in a period. He said, here's this sentence: "Life is short, period." He said, "Here's your second sentence." And then he smiled with the tears and he said, "Enjoy the ride." And I said, "I plan to." You see, I've heard so many things over the last several hours. I've heard follow me on this and follow me on that and tweet me on this and do that and this and this. I'm very proud to tell you, I own a flip phone. I'm very proud to tell you, if you'd like to follow me, not possible. I'm not on Facebook. Facebook, yeah, I did that on purpose. And by the way, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Listen to me. Listen to me. Do not misinterpret what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I got a beautiful wife and 4 beautiful kids, a grandson, and another grandson on the way. I got what I always dreamed of, understanding what it is to enjoy the ride. So when I fly into Charlotte, North Carolina tonight, and I call my wife on Interstate 77 and I say, "Honey, I'm in," she'll say, "I'm waiting." That phone will go up into a clip and it's not going to reappear until I leave again. Why? I'm going to give you something else, $1 million round table. You weren't waiting for this, and I didn't even do this in front of the committee. Technology, I am way ahead of you. You call our house, we have what we call here in the United States of America a landline. And I may answer it and I may not answer it. Why? Because I don't take my cell phone. I don't take any of that to dinner. Why would I take that to dinner with my wife? Why would I take it to a movie with my children? See, the key to enjoying the ride, you can look at the whole person. You can look at the relationships, and you can look at the well-being of this, the spiritual. You can look at it all. But the key is from my wife. I finished writing that book, and there was so much publicity about it, and before I knew it, it was on the bestsellers list, and before I knew it, my neighbors were coming and congratulating me, and before I knew that, I was sending out a lot of free books to a lot of neighbors' friends. But 2 years after I wrote the book and was traveling around the world speaking, my wife had that book on an end table one night when I come home, and I saw the tears shoot down her face. And I said, "What's wrong, sweetie?" She said, "I just want to tell you something. Please don't take this wrong." And I said, "What's that?" She said, "I think you're an incredible father." She said, "I couldn't ask for more than a husband." She said, "Everything I've ever dreamed." She said, "Everybody loves you." But she said, "Do me one favor." I said, "I'll do anything for you." And the tears streaming down, she handed me my book and said, "Live your book." It's one thing to have the principles. It's one thing to have the message. It's one thing to sit here and listen to all the great speakers. Now what you have to do is apply it. Because if you're going to enjoy the ride, cure your destination disease. I mean, just cure it, because I'm going to tell you something. You know what I miss the most about my oldest two? I told my one best friend, I said, I'd give anything in my life for one more Friday night high school football game. But I said, I'll never see Josh again at that game. I'll never see those things again. Why? Well, I'll see my grandsons. But you know what I used to do? It was always what was next. I enjoyed the day. I was back there, and if you don't think I was eating sandwiches in the green room, just ask the staff. Because one guy came in and said, well, we just put 4 more down. Dan's over there doing handstands, and I'm... Then he asked me if I was going to do a cartwheel. I'm like, no. But there's something else you need to do. And Chad Hymas was here this week, and I admired Chad. He's got an incredible message. Chad talked about making a difference. And if you're going to enjoy the ride, you have to make a difference. But if you're going to enjoy the ride, I'm going to challenge you to do one thing as a result of being here at the 2011 annual $1 Million Roundtable meeting. I want you to ask yourself, who put you here? Who put you here? Who influenced your life? Who made a difference in your life? And before you leave here, I want you to, on a flight, start making a list of those people that you would have on that list of people that made a difference in your life. I made that list. And it was amazing when I began to make my list who made my list. Of course, my mom made my list. And I realized this incredible audience is made up of a lot of diversity, but I have to share my heart. My mother is a King James Version, front row, Bible spit and spewing, John 3:16, for God's world, you better have your life right Baptist. And if you ever sit beside my mother in an airplane, you will meet God. At least her version of the higher being. But I got to tell you something. She was there when I needed her. She was my rock. She was my strength. Guess who else makes my list? My secretary, Margaret. I call them Margaretisms. In my new book, Making a Difference, I put a lot of Margaretisms. Why? Because Margaret was wise way beyond her years. Margaret taught me how to enjoy the ride. But when I spoke at Margaret's funeral, I will never forget, I walked into the church and my jaw dropped and I looked out and I said, wow, 850 people packed a church to pay tribute to a woman who impacted so many lives. I said to one of her neighbors, I said, so you are? She said, I'm her neighbor. I said, tell me a little bit about her. Said, she just lit up a room when she walked in, but she always told you what you needed to hear, not what you wanted to hear. My wife makes my list. I was backstage with Bill Cates, and Bill said, man, he said, how's that work out? I said, works out good. I said, she understands my schedule. I said, being a former flight attendant, she understands. And then I had that, fourth person. I wasn't sure where I was going to head with that one. But before I leave you, I'm going to tell you the fifth and final person who made my list, who, ladies and gentlemen, puts me in Atlanta, Georgia today. A 6th grade teacher. Margaret may have taught me how to enjoy the ride, but a 6th grade teacher influenced my life and made such a difference that that's why I'm here. Now, I don't know why you're here. You're saying, no, I understand how you end up here. I'm saying who influenced you to be here? Who gave you that voice to be here? I was being drugged down the hall by my ear in 6th grade. These were the good old days. I don't know if you remember the good old days. Some of you do. That's back when if you threw something in the cafeteria, all of a sudden your hand was slapped. There was no counting. 1, 2, 3. I was at a grocery store one time, some woman started counting. She said, if I get to 5, Billy, I heard my mother under her breath say, take her to 5, Billy. When she got to 4.5, my mother hollered, 5, whack 'em. And then I heard Christine, she almost referenced timeout. I want to know one thing from this international audience. What the heck is a timeout? I want to see hands. How many ever got I never got a timeout. How many ever, who never got a timeout? I never got a timeout. I said to my mother, I never got a timeout. She said, you want a timeout? She said, I'll put you to the mat and you won't come up. But I went back to verify the story so I could share it with you. That sixth grade teacher who was dragging me down the hall got intercepted by the gentleman that's in my new book, the gentleman that made a big difference in my life, a gentleman that helped me enjoy the ride, a gentleman that's on my list. Now, I'm 30 years old. Hey, when you're young and good looking and in shape, you can say, yeah, well, I'm 43. It ain't happening with me. But that math teacher looked up at his social studies homeroom teacher and said, well, what are you doing? He said, I want to know what you're doing. What's going on here? That social studies teacher asked him, and that math teacher looked at him and said, what do you think's going on? Who's involved? He said, he said he's a jerk. He just disrupts everything. Because of time, let me share the short version. I get taken to the principal's office, fortunately that day, by my homeroom teacher, who said, let me take him. And that math teacher said, he's all yours. Sitting in front of that homeroom teacher looked at me and said, I've seen your standardized test scores, and I want to know one thing. How can a kid score that high and never make an A in first, second, third, fourth, or fifth grade? I began to cry, and I said, you really want to know? You see, back then, I'd have done anything for your attention. I said, you have any idea what it's like to be hiding under a bed with your older brother? When you hear your dad screaming at your mother, and you hear your dad say, I'm leaving and you'll never see me again, and you tell that little one, that youngest, you tell him, you're the one who wanted two. I wanted one. Now you deal with it. You see, I'd have done anything. But thank goodness it was a sixth grade teacher who looked at me with tears in his eyes, streaming down his face. And he stood up and he said, all that aside, I have no idea what you're going through, but I do know this. And he put his hand on my shoulder and said, you've got a lot of promise, and I'm going to be there for you. He showed up to my little league games. He showed up to my junior high games. He showed up to my high school games. When I graduated from high school after making my first A in sixth grade, when he showed up at my graduation in high school, I gave him a big hug. But it was a few years ago when the Pittsburgh Business Times recognized my company as one of the fastest growing privately held companies in the region. I went to get an award, and as I went to get the award, it was at a downtown hotel, and I was all excited, but I was also nervous. My mom was with me. They called my name and the name of my company, and before I knew it, I was standing there thanking a lot of people. When I went to leave the hotel lobby, I heard a gentleman say, Steve Gilliland. And I turned, and there was an elderly man. He said, would you come over here, please? I said, sure. He said, I came down here. He said, you don't know me, but I'm from your hometown. I said, what's my hometown? He told me. I said, yeah, that's where I'm from. I said, tell me again. He said, I drove my neighbor down. He's not allowed to drive. He's over here in the sofa. I walked around the sofa, and there sat an elderly man, tears shooting down his face. No, he wasn't invited to the event, but when he saw it in the paper, he said to me, the neighbor said, he came across, he said, that's him. I know it's him. When I turned around to that sofa, and I looked, and he looked at me, and he said, I always knew you had a lot of promise. I said, Mr. Reed, he said, I wouldn't have missed this for the world. One person not only can change the world, but one person in your company who is driven with enough purpose and fueled with enough passion and defined with enough pride, one person in your organization can change the climate of that organization. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not how you start in life, and it is not how you finish. The true joy of life is in the trip. Enjoy the ride. Thank you so much. Thank you.